Hello, everyone far and wide. Welcome to another episode of the Filmocracy podcast, sponsored by iGEMS, sponsored by Film Festival Mastery, sponsored by the Kickstarter guy, sponsored by the world. So,
I haven't
hey,
seen any of these checks, by the way, from all these
exactly.
sponsors.
You're supposed to be writing the checks, Justin.
Oh, that's right. Good point. Crap. It's in the mail, Paul.
I don't have a mailbox, so great.
Ha!
Today, we're going to talk about scripts. Ooh, scripts. I don't have a sound effect for scripts.
Oh no, no sounds?
No sound effect for scripts. I don't know what would work for that, but we'll put something in post.
Fix
Yeah,
that.
so why don't we just start with festivals, because that's what we love the most here, and how they impact screenwriters. And maybe John, you can kick it off, as you know, iGEMS and Film Festival Mastery all have some tentacles in these sorts of things.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think, one of the things that you get right out of the gate when you're programming film festivals, you push play and you can tell pretty quickly which movies have a good script. And sadly, it's the thing that independent filmmakers take most for granted, I think, followed closely by hiring their friends to be the star. But I think that, we've seen a lot of film festivals focus on the writing of late. And certainly, you look at festivals like the Austin Film Festival, that is probably one of the first to really focus on the writer's contribution, right, to film and TV. I know Justin can talk a little bit about Austin in a few minutes, but I think that the important to think about here is we're all about fostering new talent, discovery, networking, and I think when filmmakers go to film festivals, it's a great opportunity to meet other writers, right? You have other stories to tell, you have ideas you want to share, but sometimes you need a quality screenwriter to jump in. And you can also see panels at film festivals that can be really helpful at kind of ironing out your craft. And of course, some festivals give awards for screenwriting. So we'll come back to that again later too. But I do think film festivals and the screenwriter is something that could use a little more attention. So I'm glad that we're talking about it today. Justin, tell us what you think about Austin as a good place to start.
Yeah. So I've had a couple finalists for scripts in Austin. It's always, I'd say Austin and Slam Dance are really the two festivals whose screenwriting competitions have a lot of weight in the industry. Like those would be tier one screenplay with festivals, excepting like some genre type fests. But Austin is definitely kind of known as the writers festival. So even the films that they're accepting, it's really built around the writing as being a foundational piece of it. They do a ton of workshops, they do a ton of classes, a lot of panels, they bring in a lot of big writers and showrunners. And interestingly enough, it's one of the particularly in the writing space and more so lately in the TV space, as TV writing has just continued to be amazing, where you'll see big industry names showing up in a non-LA festival, or a non, kind of, the Sundances and that kind of stuff. So Austin definitely carries that reputation, and I think deservedly so, and getting highly ranked finalist, semifinalist in their screenplay competitions can definitely help a writer get meetings.
Hey, just a quick thought on just over the years, they've had people like Lawrence Kasdan, Robert Altman, Caroline Thompson, huge writers, Oscar winners.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, you name it, and they come and they're hanging out, right? They're
hugely
mixers. They're in the
accessible.
lounge. They're approachable.
Totally. I mean, if you're a writer and like writing is your main gig, I would be, or if you're a filmmaker but you're the writer director as opposed to the director writer, going to Austin is a good idea for sure.
It's surprising that there's not more that focus on writing. Like writing is so important and it doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's because it seems so approachable to people. Like it doesn't get as much consideration as like what the vision is or where you're going to shoot or what the cast is going to be.
Mhm.
But I think especially today, like there's so much content being made all the time that the quality, like good quality writing, really stands out from like this kind of mess that we're all in right now. When you see stuff like Red Notice, which is like, I don't know who wrote that, but
Yeah.
just like identityless writing almost. Like you have no opinion, you have no perspective, you're just checking the boxes of like this should happen and this should happen next, and plot point leading to the next, scene. Um, and then you get something like Drive My Car, which is extremely well written, and it like hits you at so many different levels. Or like Power of the Dog is another good
Yeah.
example where like it's
Mm-hmm.
so
Great
much
idea.
more cerebral, and you can really like feel how much thought went into the entirety of writing this script. But
Yeah, and I
yeah,
think that if you look back at, again, kind of staying anchored in the festival community here, you think about over the years the types of discoveries that have been made for the writers. And you think back, we talk about him a lot, but Steven Soderbergh, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I mean, terrific script, nominated for an Oscar, little tiny movie at the time, but it really kind of helped put Sundance on the map and show the independent film distributors that film festivals were a place where you could discover new talent. And of course, he went on to make a zillion more movies, and a lot of them extremely well written, even if he didn't write them. But and then you flash forward to something like Good Will Hunting, right? Ben Affleck,
So
Matt
good
Damon
writing.
won the Oscar. Sleeper hit. Wow, what a great script.
Yeah, I still think of all that movie does, and it does so many good things. I mean, Robin Williams, the acting, I mean, all of it, right?
He was so
Um,
good.
but when I think about what makes that movie shine, I always go back to the writing. It's
Mhm.
just so goddamn well written that you could have had almost anybody, say those lines and it would still be good. But then when you have these amazing actors say the lines, I mean, if you just like YouTube Robin Williams Good Will Hunting and enjoy the next hour of just like awe that you experience as you watch him say these incredible words. So, yeah, I forgot
Yeah,
how
and
much I love the
Paul
script of that
mentioned,
film.
I feel like it was last week or the week before, he was talking about the idea of, kind of do what you know instead of what's
Mhm.
trending. And what's great about that script is like those guys came from Boston, right?
Yep.
I mean, they were entrenched in that world and they wrote what they knew, and it felt real.
Yeah. Yeah. I think more and more too, as we're seeing the amount of content out there, the more authentic the voice, uh, that authenticity in voice is really, I think, the key to content being for a script turning into something more than a blueprint for a project.
yeah. And I'm not a talent like Justin is, so I don't have that true like creative perspective of like what makes a good script. Like I can tell when I read it that this is good,
Yeah.
but I don't necessarily know exactly like how it's broken down and why. But it was people like me that had to make these decisions on like what films move forward in the process.
Mhm.
And we don't have a ton of time to like take a script and like light a cigar and like page by page really like soak it in. We're
Mhm.
reading fast. We're reading,
Fast.
multiple scripts a day, and it's really like a well-written script, you can see it on the page fairly quickly.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that
by
will,
page 3, you know if this person can write. Because
yeah.
sometimes people are going to do things in the first page or two that might be off. There's all these like, don't do voiceover, don't do a lot of description, but every once in a while, a great writer does, and it's fine. But it takes but by page 3, you know if this person can write, and so you got for all you writers out there, like make sure your first 3 pages are the bomb because there are so many scripts that are put down at about page 3 if you haven't hooked them yet.
Yeah, or even page 10. I think
Yeah,
one
3
of
to
the
10.
things
Yeah.
that that I learned over time was that, you can't really write every description and every little reaction or gesture that a character is going to make. And what a good writer is able to do is essentially paint the picture of these characters. And, within 10 or 15 minutes, you don't need any description. Like, you see what that dialogue is, and you're visualizing that person deliver, and you know what they're doing with their body and their facial expressions, right? You don't say, eyes go wide or turns real fast, or and you could tell a good writer that trusts that within a few pages they know that the reader is going to understand who these people are.
100%.
Yeah, writing is it sounds like anybody can do it, right? But your odds of making it as a professional writer in Hollywood are less than making it into the NFL.
That makes sense.
Why don't you try that instead? Go be a linebacker.
Right.
Or be a rock star. You got a better chance of being a rock star.
Yeah, I wonder what it'd be interesting comparison of like the top tier talent, stuff like that. But I'm not. I mean, yeah. There's
you could be discovered on YouTube as a singer songwriter. It's hard to be discovered as a writer.
Yeah, you got to write something amazing, and usually it's not your first thing. Or if it is your first thing, it's funny. Our first thing, my writing, I write with a partner. Our first thing has always been our go-to sample that's gotten us work and gigs and that kind of stuff. But it's feeling its age now. I mean, I was talking to you, John, in prep for this about how my partner and I are like revamping a lot of our scripts and that to go out and incorporate more of the blacklist and the screenplay competitions as part of our overall strategy. And as great as this script has been for our career, I read it now and I'm like, oh yeah, this is my first script. I'm seeing all the things that even as a good writer, I didn't know yet and hadn't practiced enough. And so as an example, the characters calling each other by their first names all the goddamn time. So it's like Jim, blah, 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 blah. Okay, Ashley, blah, 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 blah. And the dialogue is good, but there's always like a name there. And that was one of the notes we got from Austin. Actually, it was like, you could just like not say their names as much. Like the writing's great, but just don't say their names as much. We're like, that makes sense. Cause that's how, I haven't used my wife's first name, except for today when my daughter was running in the background. I was like, Ryan, help us, please. So yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that about how long it takes and how much work you have to do. I remember reading an article years ago about Oliver Stone and how long it took him to break in. And it was 1978 Midnight Express. And it won him the Oscar. But there was a big article about how it was, I don't remember if it was 8th or 9th, but he had written 7 or 8 scripts before that final one actually clicked and worked and sold. And I think, one of the things you read about when you read these books about screenwriting is, you got to just keep writing. Writing is rewriting. And even if the first one doesn't sell or you don't get it made, write the next one. But the other thing I wanted to bring up that I think is interesting is I've always been a fan of, and I know you are too, Justin, in the greenlight yourself, but is don't wait around for somebody to say yes. Find a way to just make something happen. And probably one of the more famous examples of this is somebody like Billy Bob Thornton, right? Who knew that if he could turn Sling Blade, which started as a one-man play and then was a short, and he knew if he made that into a feature and started it, that it was going to put him on the map.
Yeah.
And the script was amazing. The performance was amazing. He I don't know if he won the Oscar or was just nominated, but it certainly was a big deal. But I think if you can, again, back to Good Will Hunting, if you can write what you know and create a part for yourself, or if you're a director, something that you think you can pull off. I mean, don't go try and write, the next Indiana Jones. Nobody's going to give you that kind of money, but write something that you think you could direct yourself if that's your passion, or if you want to act, whatever your deal is. Don't wait for somebody to say yes. Just go for it.
Yeah. Hugely important. If you're not doing that, you will not be in this industry. I think there are so few talents now where it's like you wear one hat and that's how you got famous. It's like if you're really wanting to be a heavyweight in this industry, you gotta be constantly greenlighting yourself and generating your own content, and either writing or finding really talented writers that understand the vision that you have, and collaborating in that way. No one's
I think
handing out
there's some
careers anymore.
opposing ideas here also, though, because you want to, on one hand, be authentic and write stories that you know, but some people don't have that much of that. Like, you need to have multiple things going at the same time. You need to keep writing new scripts. You can't just like work on one script forever.
Correct. Yes.
Because then, like we talked
Mhm.
about this too, like if you do get something made, somebody sees it, it's maybe not likely that they want that one thing you just made, but they see the talent and they'll ask you what else you got. Like, do you have something in this vein or something on this topic or something else? I think it was, this may be wrong, but I think Taika Waititi, I was watching an interview and they were asking him about his writing process, and he was like, I will write something and then I will put it away for a year.
A
And then I will
year.
read it again in a year and read it with completely like fresh out of that time in my life to this new time in life. And if I think it's good enough, then I'll start rewriting it. He
That's
won't-
cool.
Yeah. If he likes it, then he'll rewrite it. And so that's what I think not enough attention is done to. Like, if you're going to be a writer in Hollywood, you better be writing all the time. Like, you better
Mhm.
be like hitting new scripts, new ideas, getting that work in, because this is a skill and you got to hone that skill over time. It's not like you're going to come up with that one great script and make that one great movie and then Hollywood's going to come a knocking. Like, that never,
No,
how it works.
no. And you just get better over time. I mean, it's such an obvious duh, but like you just got to keep practicing, and finding your own specific voice, and being able to express that. Like the way you're going to get to that is just in that execution and practice for sure.
Yeah, or find the way to find a way to discover stories or ideas that may be somebody else's that you can either adapt or put your own spin on. Because not everybody is going to necessarily come up with, the next big idea. But if you think back to, the history of Hollywood, I would say more than more than 50%, maybe even as much as 75% of the best movies made are somehow adapted from books,
Yeah.
or stories. Hamaguchi, I don't know if you guys read this story, but I think that it was based on a short story, but then when you read the interviews, it was he combined several different short stories from the same author to make to create the screenplay for Drive My Car. Really interesting story.
No, that's
But that
interesting.
wasn't
Yeah.
his idea, right? But he knew that there was an interesting movie there that he wanted to develop. And so there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily going to just have the light bulb go off and say, "Here's the idea," and then they buy Sid Field's screenplay book and they go and write it.
Yeah.
It's like you can get source material from anywhere. But I do think it's important to think of a distinction between writing scripts to sell a script, right? To to
Hmm.
to Hollywood or whoever in the bigger commercial sense versus developing stories and writing with partners and filmmakers or talent in mind to develop and make yourself that are more on the independent side, which is kind of our wheelhouse, right? So it's also an important distinction. I remember when I was at an agency years ago, and the spec script market was at its peak. People are writing these scripts and trying to sell them for seven figures, and it was like the big thing in
Yeah.
town. But they weren't writing for themselves; they were trying to figure out what high concept they could latch onto and try and sell to make a paycheck. And that's a different game than connecting the dots here with writers kind of in the independent or film festival circuit.
Yeah. Totally.
But
Paul,
what do you
go ahead,
guys
Paul.
think about like screenplay competitions in general and like the value of that, or maybe even like if you've been to any workshops, Justin, for writing, like how helpful has that been? Or were you just like born with the golden quill? How would
No, I will say I think my background, which we don't talk about much, as an actor, right? So I grew up as an actor and went to conservatory for classical training as an actor. Um, that helped a lot with the writing because dialogue and character were my life for 10 years, just saying it. And I could read scripts and so that could translate. Uh, but in terms of the the workshops and stuff, there's a lot of those around. Story, Robert McKee's Story is a pretty famous one. Writers Boot Camp in Los Angeles, I think, is really great. There's books. What I would
I think
say there,
Sundance has a screenwriters lab too.
yeah, and then there's the Screenwriters Labs and the fellowships. Film Independent has great ones. Sundance. Actually, I have a list here that I had pulled up. See if there's any other. There's some labs with like Blacklist and that kind of stuff. But in general, the thing about the screenplay competitions is that there's only a few that are going to matter.
Mhm.
Right out of the gate. So the Nickel Fellowship, basically the competition put on by the Academy, Austin, and I'm
Slam
looking for
Dance.
Slam Dance is one, yep, and then you kind of start getting into some other tiers with like, Blue Cat is really well known. Final Draft has one, but really it's those three. Um,
And before Justin continues, I'm going to interrupt him for a second and just say it's really important. He's giving you a handful that are worth your time. It's really important. There's so many writers out there trying to break in, and they're looking online for these screenplay competitions. It's important to know which ones are worth your time and which ones are scams,
yeah.
because there's literally probably over 100 now, and most of
Oh,
them are a festival or a organization trying to find an angle to make some cash. And I'll be totally honest, when we first started the screenplay competition, it was literally me sitting in my kitchen in 1996 saying, okay, we just finished the festival. What are we going to do to generate revenues in the off season? So I said, well, why don't we start a screenplay competition? We'll charge a fee. We'll bring in an agency to read the winners. We'll get a studio to do a first look. Like we put it together the right way, but we started that as a fundraising mechanism, to be honest. And of course, it grew from there and became important. And I'd love to hear Justin tell his story about winning recently,
yeah.
just to, date myself again from way back when we started it 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But the important thing is you need to do your research and know which ones can actually make a difference, because it doesn't do you any good to reach out to industry players or try and find partners and say, I just won this contest. And they're like, okay, what was it called?
Yeah,
It's not on the
exactly.
radar.
Exactly. And there's a few. There's a couple that matter. And really even in those, like I said, it's Academy, it's a Nickel Fellowship, it's Austin, it's Slam Dance, and it's Blacklist. Blacklist's new service where if you can get an 8 on that
Mhm.
service. Those are the four things that will like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's book a meeting level of value. Then there's probably half dozen to 6 to 10 tier 2 ones that really that just come down to your goals. What is it that you want out of them? I really like Screencrafts competitions. They cover like every single genre. Their judges are really good, and that's what you're looking for. Then you're starting to get into like niche. And with Screencraft, for example, I know that they've now recently hired an executive whose job is to like take the finalists, even if they don't win the thing, but take the finalists and actually offer like development classes and be like, great, so you've gotten this far, let's help you. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Maybe we can make introductions, maybe we can look at your pitch deck. So a company like that is really, really great because it's about developing the writer, not just the accolade. And then tier 3 is really just hyper niche stuff where it's like you're writing a genre thing, and so you're going to go to a genre film festival that might matter, and you try to write that there. But I think a lot of people just try to win as many script competitions as possible. Doesn't really make a difference. You've got those 4 that actually matter, another dozen or so that kind of matter if they're in alignment with your goals and you leverage them right. After
So
that,
tell us, Justin, how Slam Dance has made a difference for you.
yeah. So one in 2020, I won their short. So they have like 5 winners or 4, and it's broken up into different categories. And then I was the winner in the shorts category, and like bluntly, right out of the gate, it just becomes an instant mark of like, oh, okay, cool. So you can write. Like I don't have to do any of the, oh, I'm a writer. No, really, I promise. If you read the script, you'd believe me, I'm sure. And like I just don't have to do any of that. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Yes, send your script. So that skipping of that is really, really easy. And in general, that opens doors. I've had meetings and getting things read and getting things produced. I think the biggest way that it's helped um, is just kind of the interest factor on projects in general. And that's the cool thing. It's like if you win, or even if you're a finalist, oftentimes with like the Nickel Fellowship or
Yeah.
Austin, you can even just be a finalist. And that's still often enough to kind of give you the big old industry seal of approval. And once
To
you
get
have
your
that,
next projects read too, right?
exactly, whether or not that next project ranks as highly. It's funny, I was on Reddit, and Reddit has a screenwriting subreddit. It's our screenwriting. That's fantastic, and I recommend to writers. But it was interesting. There was somebody on there who I think had won like the Nickel Fellowship or Austin, like one of the big ones, and then was saying that they were getting like 3s and 4s on Blacklist. So the other part of the whole screenwriting competition thing is that like you hope the right person at the right place reads the right script at the right time in the right mindset, because you will get feedback sometimes that's like, hey, this is like a 3, or you won the giant freaking competition and it's the same exact script. But it doesn't really serve writers to do a bunch of little tiny screenwriting competitions, really in any capacity, other than if you, I guess the one thing would be like as a way to get objective feedback on whether people think your stuff is good. Um, and when you're doing the academies in the Austin or the Nickel Fellowships in the Austins, you're competing with so many people that it might be challenging to feel like that feedback. But if you want to be a big fish in a small pond and just before you move to the big pond, I guess, then that might be the only reason to ever look at some of the smaller competitions. Otherwise, don't waste your time and money.
Hey, Paul, what about the table read concept? I've seen a bunch of festivals do that in the last few years. Didn't Filmocracy introduce a table read? Or is it? I know you
Oh,
do a script event and you're going to tell us about it, but I feel like there was a table read last year, no?
the table read was always part of the script writing competition.
Okay.
They weren't two separate things.
Okay.
But real quick before we start wrapping it up and I talk about that, I would say from the business side, it's not so different from film festivals, right? Like the big ones that matter, Tribeca, Sundance, South by Southwest, that's like your stamp of approval. Getting into one of those kind of like, lets you bypass all the other hurdles from the beginning. And so the same thing with these writing competitions or even getting on the list, because Blacklist is one, but there's another one called Bloodlist, which is for horror writers. So these are like, obviously that's somebody trying to copy Blacklist, but it is still a useful thing, right? And so people are now treating that as like a good filtering mechanism to find interesting stuff. And especially for horror, I would say, and genre stuff, you're really kind of looking for new angles, and it's not so important some other factors that might be in other things. So um, yeah, basically having those stamps of approval are very helpful if you're going to try to meet some executive who wants to put development money behind your idea, because otherwise we're just getting scripts from agencies. When I was working for my company, it was the agencies that were sending us like tons and tons of scripts every day, and they already often had attachments. And so that's why we choose those first, because it already has the backing of an agency and already has some form of talent attached. And so when your script comes out of nowhere and you don't have any, even like a screenwriting competition that you've won or anything, then it's kind of like, am I going to spend even 20 minutes of my time to read this random thing? Probably not. But if it went to Austin, then I'm like, oh, maybe I could be the first one to discover this guy who's a good writer. And that's
Yeah.
kind of exciting. So you need kind of like one of those two angles to really get in front of like important people. Or you could greenlight yourself, as we're all.
Yep. And Blacklist's service, they now have a service where you can host and get evaluations. And if you get an 8, even if you get a 7, but if you get an 8 or higher, that's pretty great and can usually get meetings going. It's expensive as shit. You're going to spend several $100s before you get feedback, and then you might discover that the feedback is like, not good, and you start all over again. And there's like a monthly hosting fee of just having the script up there of, tons of money. So it's a pretty big investment, but it is one of the more direct ways to affect your career.
Cool.
So something that you experience a lot in LA is going to networking events, and you get a wide assortment of people there, usually no business people and mostly creatives who are new to LA and trying to break into the industry or figure out what's going on because they moved here from like Kentucky or some
I know,
state
some
like that.
some
So
backwards state.
they show up, they're at like a bar, and people are meeting each other, getting their name tags. Before pandemic, we would meet in physical real life. And so like, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm a writer. Cool. And then what? There's nothing, the conversation can't go
So is
anywhere.
he standing right next to me?
So am I. Hey, look at us.
I'll send you a script. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's it. So what we decided for Filmocracy was try to come up with something interesting to actually showcase what writing talent is. And so we're actually doing it this Saturday. And we take 8 writers. They get a prompt. And this is new for this edition, is we're doing it kind of like Chopped, the TV show, the cooking show, where you have a basket of words that are voted on by the audience, and you have to incorporate those words into your script over an hour. Justin, you should actually participate one week.
I was
think.
just gonna say, I was like, thanks for the invitation, you son of a bitch.
Okay. February was Black Screenwriters for Black History Month.
That's
and
not me.
and March is Women's History Month, so it's female.
What about
screenwriters.
White Men's History Month? Have we come up with that yet? Because
That's
then
basically
We
I
don't
can
want
get
any
that month.
ringers. No ringers, Justin.
Geez.
So
yeah.
Paul, finish telling us about this, and then I assume you're gonna tell everybody where they can go and watch, right? You're gonna put a link in the chat. You're gonna tell us so it's audio.
Yeah. So basically, you're writing for an hour. The judges come and they chat with you. They're like, just like the TV show. They're like, so how are you going to use these words to weave together a story? And I think that might be risky, that concept you're going with. And then after that, everybody reads the full finished scripts and we vote. And the top 3 get table read, performed by some actors that we have from one of our sponsors, Hollywood Casting and Film. And it's really fun because they're like on the fly trying to like perform this piece that they just read. And it's just like a nice way to really showcase some talent on like a real level. And what a lot of feedback we've been getting is like, as a writer, it's so isolating. You write all the time alone and you don't really get that type of connection with anyone. You don't really know what people think of your work until you send it to some friends, but then how actually nice is that feedback or useful is that feedback. So this is like a very like grassroots way that you can participate and get some practice, try to write under pressure, and have some people like see what you're capable of. And we've actually had some management companies reach out to us and say, hey, can we get in touch with your winners, because I have a filmmaker director client who's looking for some scripts. And so we connected them with our winners and they're working out a deal. So, it's a small world, and any way that you can get that type of exposure, I think is helpful. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do with Filmocracy. So If anyone is interested, you can find all the information on Eventbrite. You just type the Scriptwriter Showdown. Scriptwriter is one word. You'll find it. You'll see the information, and you can come. It's free, and it's a good time. It'll be on this Saturday. I don't know if this podcast will be up by then, but for anyone who does see it,
I'll put it up on iGems tomorrow. But
Yep.
also, you can get the information at filmocracy.com under events. So
it's true.
you can click there as well. Very exciting.
Sweet. I like that.
It's fun. Yeah. When we do white male
History.
screenwriters version,
Jeez.
you'll be our headliner, Justin.
Hit me up. Represent. From Kentucky too, so I can be the Kentucky white male, Southern State white male month. That's what we're missing, guys. Oh my
Represent.
God. Represent. Gents, always a pleasure. I'm gonna go make a brisket for St. Patrick's Day. I believe we've wrapped.
Wow, so Southern.
Yeah,
So-
right. Well,
It's
sure,
very
whatever.
southern. It's very southern. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks, you guys. Awesome as usual.
Mm-hmm.
That'll
See you
do
on
it
the flip
for this
side.
episode. See you on the flip side.
Yep.